SQL interview questions and answers 131 to 140. Question number 131. What is SQL Profiler? SQL Profiler is a tool used for tracing, analyzing, and replacing events in SQL Server. It allows users to create and manage traces to diagnose problems and analyze performance issues in the database. Developers and database administrators (DBAs) use the profiler to monitor and troubleshoot SQL Server issues in real time. SQL Profiler is available from Windows Start Menu, Database Engine Tuning Advisor, and SQL Server Management Studio. When launched, it displays a Connect to Server dialog box where users can specify a SQL Server instance. Another way to get the version of SQL Server is to run a query using SQL Server Management Studio. Connect to the instance of SQL Server and run the following query. Select @version. This will return a result showing the version of SQL Server and other information such as edition, build number, and operating system. It is also possible to retrieve individual property value using the server property function in SQL Server. Question number 32. What command using query analyzer will give you the version of SQL Server and operating system? The query analyzer is an older tool and has been replaced by SQL Server Management Studio. However, there are several ways to get the version of SQL Server and operating system using SQL Server Management Studio or other tools. One way to get the version of SQL Server and operating system is to connect to server using Object Explorer in SQL Server Management Studio. Once connected, the version information is displayed in parentheses next to server name. Another way to get the version of SQL Server is to run a query using SQL Server Management Studio. Connect to instance of SQL Server and run the following query. Select @version. This will return a result showing the version of SQL Server, other information, edition, bit number, operating system. It is also possible to. Question number 133. What does it mean to have quoted identifier on? What are the implications of having it off? When quoted identifier is set to on in SQL Server, it means that the server will treat double quotation marks as part of identifier or object name. This can be helpful when working with object names that are also reserved words in SQL Server or contain spaces. The implications of having quoted underscore identifier off are that SQL Server will not treat double quotation marks as part of the identifier or object name. This means that reserved words and spaces cannot be used in object names and identifiers, and any object names or identifier with these properties will have to be renamed or restructured. Additionally, certain programming construct that depends on quoted identifier may not work properly if quoted identifier is turned off. It is worth noting that quoted identifier is set to on by default in SQL Server, and it is generally recommended to leave it at that setting, as turning it off can lead to potential issues with object naming and programming constructs. Question number 134. What is the stuff function and how does it differ from replace function in SQL? The stuff function and replace function in SQL are used to manipulate strings, but they have different functionalities. The stuff function deletes a sequence of characters from a source string and then insert another string into it, starting at a given position. The syntax for the stuff function is stuff character expression start length replace with expression. On the other hand, replace function replaces all occurrences of a specified string with another string in a given string. The syntax for replace function is replace string expression string pattern string replacement. In summary, the stuff function and replace function have different functionality in SQL. The stuff function is used to delete a sequence of characters and insert another string at a specified position, while the replace function is used to replace all occurrences of a specified string with another string. 135. How to get error and row count at the same time. According to search result, to get both error and row count at the same time in SQL, one can use select statement to assign both values to local variable. The local variables can then be checked for their values. Here is an example code snippet. So this is snippet SQL code declare @rc int @er int select @rc is equal to @@ row count comma @er is equal to @error. If @er begin handle the error and else begin use row count. It is important to note that checking @row count before error can reset error. So it is best to use select statement to assign both values to local variable within a single statement. Question number 130. What is denormalization in SQL database administration? Give example. Denormalization is a database optimization technique in which redundant data is added to one or more tables to improve a read-oriented data retrieval performance. In other words, it is the process of intentionally introducing redundancy into a database designed to improve query performance by avoiding specific joins. Denormalization should not be confused with not normalizing a database or reversing normalization, as it is an optimization technique that is applied after normalization. There are different types of normalization. One type is to join rows from different tables to avoid using queries with join. Another type is to perform aggregate calculations like sum or count or max, or others to avoid using queries with group by. A practical example of denormalization in SQL database could be a customer order database where instead of normalizing the data, it is denormalized to reduce the need for joins. For instance, instead of having separate tables for customers and orders, the data could be combined into one table with repeated customer information for each other. This denormalization technique can improve query performance and reduce the need for joining tables. Question number 137. Can you explain about buffer cache and log cache in SQL Server? In SQL Server, the buffer cache, also known as buffer pool, is a memory pool that stores data pages that have been read from a disk. When data pages are requested, SQL Server first check the buffer cache to see if the page is already in memory, and if so, retrieves it from the cache. This helps improve performance as accessing data from memory is faster than accessing it from disk. On the other hand, the log cache is a small memory cache that stores log records before they are written to disk. SQL Server uses a write ahead logging approach to ensure durability of data, which means that log records must be written to disk before changes to data pages are made. The log cache helps improve performance by allowing SQL Server to group multiple log records together and write them to disk in batches rather than one at a time. Both the buffer cache and log cache can be monitored using performance counters provided by SQL Server. For example, the buffer manager object provides counters to monitor the uses of memory to store data pages as well as physical IO input output as SQL Server reads and writes database page. The buffer pool extension is another feature that can be used to extend the buffer cache by using fast non-volatile storage such as solid state drives SSDs. Describe how to use a linked server. A linked server is a way to enable SQL Server to execute a transact SQL statement that include tables in another instance of SQL Server or a different database product such as Oracle. It allows you to query tables from a removed server as if they were local tables. Linked server can be configured for many types of OLE data sources, including third-party database providers and Azure Cosmos DB. To create a linked server in SQL Server using Transact SQL, the following code can be used. Use go exec master dbo. So this is the code. Go create a server, another instance SQL Server named. This it is important to note that there are several settings that must be considered when setting up a linked server. More info. Question number 139. Explain how to send email from SQL database. Sending email from SQL database can be done in multiple ways, as explained by the following way. One way to send email notification from SQL Server is by creating a mail profile from management database mail. To set up a mail profile, you need to follow the steps in the configuration wizard and provide a SMTP server details. Once the configuration is done, you can use sp underscore send underscore db mail stored procedure to send emails with query result attachment or both. Another way to send emails is by using CLR stored procedure, which allows for more control over the sending process. This approach can be useful if you are not able to use the built-in sp underscore send underscore db mail stored procedure or need more advanced email features. To send an email with database mail, you must first be a member of database mail user role database role in MSDB database. Once you have the necessary permission, you can use the database mail configuration wizard to configure the email setting. The wizard can be accessed through SQL Server Management Studio. Overall, sending mails from SQL database can be achieved by setting up a mail profile, configuring email setting using a wizard, or using CLR stored procedure for more advanced email features. It is important to have the necessary permission and to check SMTP server details to ensure successful email delivery. How to make remote connections in database. Remote connections in a database allows a user to connect to a database that is located on a different machine. Here are some general steps on how to make a remote connection in database based on provider server. Modify remote server connection options. In SQL Server, you can modify the remote server connection options in SQL Server properties. Server name dialog box, right click the server in Object Explorer, click Properties, click Connections, and review or modify the remote server connection settings as necessary. Provide database name password. To connect to a remote MySQL database through the command line, open the Cloudways SSH terminal and provide your application database name and password using MySQL command with the U and P options. Encrypt the password in a Oracle database. The password used to verify a remote database connection is automatically encrypted. When user attempt a remote login, the password is encrypted before being sent to remote database. Note that the exact steps may vary depending on the database management system you are using, so it's important to consult the documentation or seek additional resources specific to your database. Thank you.